All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to a national conversation hosted by the Lillian Lodge Copenhagen Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication here at Florida International University, Rowan, Stevens, and Marymount. The conversation today is titled Taking the Lead. My name is Brian Schreiner. I have the good fortune of serving as Dean here at FIU's College of Communication, Architecture, and the Arts. And since its inception in 2013, the Copenhagen Center has been offering leadership training, mentoring programs, and publishing illuminating gender equality research studies. Inspired by the wise words of Alice Walker, author of The Color Purple, who told us the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. Think about that for a minute. The most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. Well, the mission of the Copenhagen Center and its founder, Dr. Lillian Lodge Copenhagen, who I'll introduce you to in a moment, the mission is to empower success and to diversify leadership. To empower someone means to provide someone to achieve something. Today, the Copenhagen Center presents us with yet another opportunity for all of us to become empowered, to hear from and learn from trailblazing leaders who will share their insights on what it takes to become a leader and how to establish your seat at that proverbial decision-making table. It's now my pleasure to begin today's conversation by introducing you to our leader, Dr. Lillian Lodge Copenhagen. Dr. Copenhagen has been an exemplary leader, a tireless national advocate of women, diversity, equity, and inclusion her entire life. Setting an example, opening doors, creating opportunities, and paving the way for past, present, and future generations of professional scholars. Like Alice Walker, she has spent her life ensuring others don't give up their power by thinking they don't have any. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Copenhagen.
Thank you so much, Dean Schreiner. It is my pleasure to also welcome you to the National Conference of the Copenhagen Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication, Taking the Lead. We have an exciting and enlightening program planned for you this afternoon. I know that you are aware that women make up more than half the population of the United States. It is therefore very important that communications in this country represent our population equitably, both in the information that is delivered and in those who deliver that information. We have some awesome speakers with us today who will share their thoughts and advice about the theme of our conference and how you, the next generation of communicators, can succeed and be heard. The mission of the Copenhagen Center is to empower young women in all the fields of communication in order to develop visionaries and leaders who can make a difference in their communities and in their professions. Our conference today will provide us with an opportunity to look at the future of communications and explore opportunities for women to realize their potential and become those visionaries and leaders of tomorrow. We will begin with our keynote speaker in the first hour, and that will be followed by our Thought Leaders Forum in the second hour. All our speakers will take questions, and we ask you to put your questions in the chat. I want to give a warm welcome to everyone who's joined us from our satellite centers for the advancement of women in communication at Rowan University, Stevens College, and Marymount University. Joining us today as convener is Nicole Perez, primary co-anchor of WPLG Local 10's 4, 5, 6, and 11 p.m. newscasts, and also a special assignment reporter. Before joining the Local 10 news team as morning traffic reporter in 2016, Perez spent more than 5 years at WSVN Miami, working in production, and 4 years as a graphic designer for the Miami Heat's television network, Heat TV. She has covered local, national, and international news stories, including Queen Elizabeth II's funeral and committal services, the coronation of King Charles, the 75th anniversary of D-Day, the Notre Dame Cathedral fire, Holy Week in Rome, and recovery efforts in Puerto Rico post-Hurricane Maria. She has secured exclusive reports for Local 10 and particularly enjoys hearing from South Florida's unsung heroes and telling their stories. Perez's community service includes chairing walks for nonprofits, raising awareness about life-altering health conditions, and volunteering with programs that encourage youth health and fitness. Our convener is a Miami native and graduated from Florida International University with a Bachelor of Science degree in journalism and mass communications. So she is one of our alums, and we're proud of her. Our keynote today, Robin Tomlin, is Chief News Officer of the McClatchy Company, the second largest newspaper publisher in the United States and owner of 30 newspapers in 29 U.S. markets. She is a veteran journalist, media executive, and leader in transformation efforts. Tomlin previously served as McClatchy's Vice President for Local News, President and Editor of the News and Observer in North Carolina, and Southeast Regional Editor for the company's publications. Before joining McClatchy, Tomlin was the Vice President and Managing Editor of the Dallas Morning News and did a stint as Vice President of Communications and Chief Digital Officer at the Pew Research Center in Washington, D.C. She was the founding editor of Digital First Media's Project Thunderdome in New York City. She also spent a decade with the New York Times Regional Media Group, serving as the company's Director of Editorial Innovation and as the top editor of 3 dailies, the Star News in Wilmington, North Carolina, the Ocala, Florida Star Banner, and the Times Daily in Florence, Alabama. A 4-time publisher Pulitzer jurist, Tomlin sits on the boards of the Newsleaders Association, the National Press Foundation, the University of North Carolina's Hussman School of Media and Journalism's Board of Advisors, and the North Carolina Open Government Coalition. She is currently a coach in the Poynter Institute's Media Transformation Challenge program. I am pleased to present Robin Tomlin.
Thank you, Lillian. That was a lovely introduction, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you today, wherever you're tuning in from. It was such an honor to be invited to come talk to you about women and leadership in communications and tech industries right now. So let me just start with a little background. As was mentioned, I'm the Chief News Officer at McClatchy, and we are a local news and information company that owns newspapers and media outlets in more than 30 communities across the U.S. That includes the Miami Herald, the Kansas City Star, the Sacramento Bee, the Charlotte Observer, and my hometown paper, the Raleigh News and Observer, among others. I moved into this role in March of this year after more than 25 years of leadership in newsrooms across the country and about 6 years of working in leadership roles here in McClatchy. So being the Chief News Officer means I'm the corporate executive responsible for all of our content strategy and operations in all of these communities, large and small. That means I have the privilege of leading more than 850 journalists who are focused on helping us to build a sustainable future for local news in the communities that we serve. And building that sustainable future for local journalism is my purpose. As some people like to say, it's my why. It's why I get up in the morning. It's what drives me forward every day, even on the hard ones. It's what keeps me up at night worrying about how we're going to get there. But it's the thing that that really consumes my waking thoughts and a lot of my energy. I believe that local news is the heartbeat of a healthy community. It serves as a bridge between the government and the governed, providing citizens with information that they need to be engaged and informed participants in the democratic process. That is critical. It's something that needs to happen. Local journalists are there to hold power to account and to connect people to each other in their communities. Local journalists serve as a community watchdog, alerting the public to issues and concerns that can lead to policy changes. And they provide critical real-time information to residents in times of crisis, whether that's a hurricane or a wildfire or a mass shooting like we're seeing up in Maine today, or a major condo collapse like the one that happened in Surfside a few years ago. Local journalists are the ones who are on the ground, who have developed sources, who are able to help residents navigate through the uncertainties that come with major events, when major events like this happen in their community. Local news informs us, it educates us, it empowers us to make decisions that shape the communities and our nation as a whole. And in growing swaths of our country, local news is disappearing. Or I should say that the business model that has sustained local news outlets, like the ones that I work with that have been around for, in some cases, almost 200 years. I have a newspaper that's 197 years old, but the business model that has sustained them has imploded. And every week, an average of 3 local newspapers close their doors in the US. Every week, journalists who have dedicated their lives to serving their communities are laid off. And that's a hard pill to swallow, not just because it hurts people I know and respect and admire, but because it hurts those communities. We know that in communities that don't have strong local news outlets, corruption goes up, taxes go up. There are a whole host of other issues that happen in these communities because nobody's asking the tough questions. Nobody's performing that watchdog mission. My purpose, my why, is to help rebuild that business model and the way that we do journalism to serve communities in ways that will be sustainable and that can help to strengthen our democracy and the health and well-being of those who live in our communities. That's a big mission, and it's one I share with so many other journalists across the country who are fighting for credible, quality local journalism on a whole host of platforms. And there's not really one answer to that sustainability question either. There's likely many, but I believe that local news outlets like the ones that I work with are still the best positioned to play a major role in finding that solution, as long as there are people who value and are willing to invest in the work that they do. So that's my little commercial for why you all should support local news organizations, whether they're for-profit or nonprofit or print or digital or broadcast. It's really important that that you all are tuning in one way or another and are valuing that by with some form of support. We need more local journalists in our communities, and platforms like Google and Facebook have dramatically impacted the way we pay for that to happen. Advertising used to pay for about 3/4 of the cost of a local newspaper. Now it covers less than 20% of the cost, and reader revenue from subscriptions or memberships really has to cover the rest. And there are a lot of people who believe that news should be free, and they don't want to pay for it or pay for it to support the people who have to do that work. But that's beginning to change. But it's a challenging road ahead. And as you can tell, I'm passionate about this mission. I feel it down deep in my bones. And I think that passion for the mission is one of the keys to whatever success I've had in my career as a leader. I didn't start out in the C-suite, and I thought it might be helpful to tell you a little bit about the journey that I took to get where I am today. That journey started in high school, where I was an average student, and that is probably being generous. I wasn't particularly motivated, and I didn't have a clear picture of what I wanted to do or who I wanted to be. I had a few areas of interest, but nothing that focused me or felt like something I could build a career and a life around. And that started to change in my senior year of high school when I found myself pregnant with my oldest son. Suddenly, I realized I had to get serious about figuring out my future, and I had to do it fast. I knew I was responsible for a lot more than just my future, and my son was born about a month after I graduated from high school. So as soon as I held him in my arms, I knew that I owed it to him to find my purpose and to pursue it with everything I had. But even then, I didn't quite know what that was. I spent the next year or so just trying to make ends meet. I started off working as a nanny for a family who let me bring my son along with me to work. I later opened a home daycare where I took care of 5 children, all under the age of 2, for 50 to 60 hours a week. It was exhausting. And at one point, I calculated that I changed more than 6,000 diapers over the course of a year. And while I love children, still love children to this day, I knew that's not what I wanted to do with my life. So I started taking classes at night at a local community college. And eventually I closed the daycare and got a job as an administrative assistant at the college. That allowed me to juggle full-time classes and full-time work, and I was able to put my son in the college's daycare to help make all of that work. In my first year, I took an English class where the professor asked me to write weekly essays about current events or other topics of interest. And during a meeting with my professor, he asked me if I'd ever considered taking a journalism class. He said he thought I had a talent for thoughtful analysis and writing. The truth was I'd never really considered it, but with his encouragement, I did sign up for one the next semester, and I quickly found myself hooked. I loved being able to interview people and learn about their lives and the challenges that they faced. I loved knowing what was happening before others did, and finding new ways to explain what it meant in their lives. By the end of the class, I'd organized the other students to help me start a newspaper for the community college, and we produced a monthly edition that was distributed on campus for many years afterward. After receiving my associate's degree, I was able to transfer to the University of North Carolina and was accepted into their journalism school. There, I threw myself into my passion. I continued to work and raise my son as a single mom, but I also started working at the campus newspaper, the Daily Tar Heel. And for the record, I averaged about 3 hours of sleep a night in those years, and I was not necessarily the paragon of good parenting, but we made it work. And I learned a new level of resilience that has served me in the years since. The first time I walked into the Daily Tar Heel newsroom, I felt something sort of down deep. I felt like I'd found my people. They were curious, they were funny, they were focused, they were dedicated. The people who worked there were all of those things and so much more. They challenged each other and focused on serving the community of readers who relied on them. And they believed in the mission of the organization, and they made all kinds of personal sacrifices, like I was, to do journalism that mattered. I was quickly moved into an editing role at the paper, and I was suddenly making decisions about what stories to pursue and how to frame them, and I was coaching other student writers. There was so much I really didn't know, but my experience of having to figure out how to navigate life as a single mother gave me the confidence to know that I could figure this out. If I could figure that out, I could figure just about anything out. After graduating from Carolina, I was so excited to jump into my first newsroom as a reporter. I covered courts and crime, and then later City Hall, and I eventually moved into some investigative reporting, all within a few short years. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was a struggle, being a mom and being a journalist, but I managed it as best I could. And pretty soon, after a few years, I eventually married my husband, who was also a journalist, and we teamed up in that balancing act. After a few years, I faced a big decision, though. My editor asked if I would fill in as a city editor, my boss who had left the company had. So our higher editor asked if I would take his role. He said it would just be for a few months. And truth be told, I really didn't want to do it. But I agreed to, as long as he would let me go back to my beat at the end of that role. Well, 3 months became 6 months, and then my editor came back and asked if I'd be willing to consider staying in the role. And I really had to consider this. I mean, was this what I wanted to be doing with my life? Was that the path I wanted to be on? What I learned during that 6 months was that I got just as much, and often maybe more, out of helping others succeed as I did doing just my own reporting. I was 27 when I agreed to move into editing and leadership roles full time. And that was 25 years ago, so which feels like forever and also yesterday. So it's been a long way, a long journey since then. And along the way, I've learned a few things, and I thought I might share a few of those with you all today. First, I learned that being a strong leader is all about building relationships and earning trust. And that doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, it takes intention, and as hard as it is to get that trust, you can lose it in an instant. And it's much harder to rebuild it once it's been damaged. I also learned that there's no such thing, at least for me, as work-life balance. There are times when work will take everything you have and more, and there are times when the same is true for your family and the other parts of your life. And trying to balance that equation is a recipe for frustration, or at least it was for me. I've been blessed to have a husband who's been a true partner. We married when I was about 26 and in my second year of working as a reporter, and soon after our second son was born. We were both working in the same newsroom and trying to juggle 2 kids and 2 careers, and it was crazy. But not long after I agreed to become an editor, we learned that our youngest son was on the autism spectrum. And so we took a long look at our lives and decided that one of us needed to be more focused on helping him navigate the world and get the support that he needed. And my husband was quick to volunteer to be that person. And while we had a lot of work to do to rearrange our finances and our lives to make all of that work, his sacrifice gave me the room to continue to grow in my career during those years. That didn't mean it was easy. Juggling family and work is always a challenge. But after spending the first few years of my adult life as a single mom, I was all the more appreciative of the partnership that I built and the ability to have someone to share those burdens. And my kids, who are now in their 20s and 30s, which it doesn't seem possible, but it is, they tell me that they're no worse for the wear. And in fact, they tell me that watching us figure this out was good for them. And while there were times when I know I fell short as a mom, they forgave me, and I'm certainly grateful for that grace. Another lesson I've learned as a leader is that I have to be intentional and actually vocal when I'm prioritizing myself or my family. It's not enough to just do it. It's important that others see me doing it so that I'm giving them, both the women and the men, the permission to do the same thing. In my early days, most of the leaders I patterned my behavior after were men, and most of those were older men who didn't have kids at home. So I often felt like I was doing something wrong if I needed to leave in the middle of the day to take my kid to a doctor's appointment, or if I rushed out to make it to a soccer game in the afternoon. My managers would say it was fine, but I often didn't see them doing the same thing, so I really had doubts. But over the years, I worked with others, both women and men, who showed in their words and their actions that it was not just okay, but it was important, not just to tell people to prioritize self-care and life out of work, but to lead by example. And I've tried to do the same thing in the years since. Another thing I've learned as a leader is that people are always watching. They look for signals and signs, and they're always trying to read between the lines of everything you say and do. And in many of the places I've worked, my office had a wall of windows. So every difficult conversation or heated discussion was being interpreted by an audience of people who might not even hear the words, but they could read my face or they could read my body language. I learned that when I was having a rotten day, people would read that and they would make all kinds of assumptions about why. And many of those were just not even true. When you're a casual person who tries to be authentic in your interactions with others, that realization actually can put you on edge. But it's important to be aware of how you're being perceived and to consider that in all that you're doing. Another lesson I've learned is that my job is a leader, as a leader, is to be the best listener, the best collaborator, and the best learner around. I absolutely do not have all or even most of the answers to the big questions that we wrestle with on a daily basis, but I surround myself with people who are always curious and driven to do the right thing. And by doing that, those answers generally will emerge. We're always better together. I use the skills I learned as a reporter: curiosity, interest in people and their stories, a desire to understand how things work and to understand the systems and the history that made them that way, and the desire to see a positive change. I use that in my work as a manager and a leader every day. The media landscape is changing rapidly. When I started my career, the internet was barely a thing. We were just beginning to use ISPs like America Online, and which made all the noise when you logged in, or Hotmail, to communicate with people. I'm not even sure that Google even existed at that point. And I think that the first newspapers started posting stories on the internet about the time I graduated from college. I wanted to be a newspaper reporter, but I quickly learned that the biggest need in my industry was people who were not so set in their ways that they could not begin to imagine how legacy institutions that had, in some cases, had 100, 150, 200 years of service in their communities, how they could transform for a digital era. My newsroom still produce newspapers, some daily, but others have actually reduced print frequency, and they're working toward a place and transforming the way they do what they do so that they can be sustainable digital media companies, in a day when they no longer print a physical newspaper. That day's coming, and we're all intensely focused on building a new business model for sustainably serving those communities. That means we're working to help bridge long-term print readers onto new platforms, and also learning to adapt our journalism to connect with and serve younger and new audiences who never read a newspaper. Our journalists have become experts on audience-focused journalism. They use data and analytics to help guide them and inform how we tell stories. They are experts in using social media platforms to both connect with readers and to tell stories. And in recent years, we've embraced storytelling on a whole host of platforms: vertical video on TikTok and Instagram stories. We have podcasts and video docuseries on big issues. We're constantly experimenting with new ways to engage with people in our communities. And that includes new audiences, again, who've never read a newspaper. So to do that, we've had to learn to focus intensely on reflecting the fullness of those communities. That means doing a much better job of diversifying the content, the sources, our own staffing and leadership in our newsrooms to ensure that people, no matter who they are or where they come from, that they see themselves in our products. And let's be honest, a lot of media organizations have not done the best job of building trust, especially in underrepresented communities. I learned that the hard way when my oldest son, who is biracial, was about 10. When we were at the breakfast table one morning, he was flipping through the newspaper that I edited, looking for the comics section. And suddenly he looked up at me with these big brown eyes and said, "Mom, why does nobody in your newspaper look like me?" You could have stabbed me in the gut and it would not have hurt. It would have hurt less than those words coming out of my sweet baby boy's mouth. But he was right. And I vowed that day to change that. And it's been a core part of my mission ever since. I'm going to start wrapping this up so we have some time for questions. Again, I'm really grateful to have had this opportunity to tell you a little bit about my leadership journey and all that I've learned along the way. As you can tell, I've had a bit of an unconventional path, and I share that because I know that there's a lot of people who struggle to see themselves in leadership roles. They feel the imposter syndrome. They hear the voice in their ear telling them that they aren't enough. My journey as a single mother who had to make her own way in life taught me the power of resilience. It would have been so much easier for me just to keep changing those diapers. And there were plenty of times that I just wanted to throw in the towel and give up. But I knew that I had bigger things in store for myself and that I owed it to my son to pursue them. And once I found my purpose and my mission and my passion, I was able to apply that grit and resilience to my work. And in my experience, it's often the people who've had to overcome big challenges, big obstacles, who are able to become some of the best leaders. They develop a level of empathy and compassion and a drive to succeed that takes time and effort, but it doesn't mean it's easy. I know too many women who think that they have to check all of the boxes before they jump into a new challenge. I read an article recently that called it the perfectionism pitfall. They said that, we feel like we have to have done all of the things before we're ready to jump into the next thing. But I'm here to tell you, you need to trust your gut and know that most people learn by doing. You will never be 100% ready for any new challenge, but that doesn't mean that you can't get there. I'm here to tell you that no matter what your passion is, ignore that little voice that tells you you aren't enough, because you are enough. And you can learn the skills that you need to lead and to succeed. So thank you for that. And thank you for taking the time to listen. And Nicole, I think I'm all yours.
All right. Thank you, Robin. Your story touched me. I almost wanted to cry at one point. So I really appreciated hearing everything. I mean, you definitely inspired me today just listening to that. So hi, everyone. Thank you to Robin. I'm going to chat with Robin for a little bit until we get some of your questions in. Robin, your story, it's incredible. It's incredible where you are now with your life and where you were 15, 20 years ago. To all of the younger people that are listening, to the women, to the men, to everybody, what's your message to them? Maybe somebody who's going through that, maybe somebody who's a single mom, maybe somebody who just had a baby and doesn't know what to do and thinks that their life is over. What is your message to them to keep going when they think that they just can't and they just need to throw in the towel?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the message that life is hard. I mean, I don't know anybody who doesn't have, big challenges and obstacles that get thrown in front of them. But in so many ways, it's how you respond to those challenges and how you are able to focus and build resilience in yourself so that you're able to deal with those and sometimes progressively more difficult challenges in your life in a way that that actually gives you strength rather than takes it away. And I think that's, to me, that's the core message. I never had unlike some people, I never had a clear picture of what where I wanted to be. I just knew that I wanted to make a difference. And I knew that the best way to do that was to be in some of these leadership roles. And so, I would watch what other people were doing. And I would say, I had the same imposter syndrome issues that so many others did. Could I do that? I don't think I've got all the right things. But I was lucky to surround myself with a wonderful group of mentors who, when I felt that, would challenge me and they would push me and they would say, look at what you've done. Look at what you've already done. You know, if you can do this, you can do anything. And I think we all have to remind ourselves of that. And we all need to make sure that we surround ourselves with people who give us strength, and who are, you know, you can be vulnerable with, who you can tell, you know, you can talk about the voices in your head that sometimes will try to tell you can't do something. But you know, I think it's really important that, you know, that we find a way through it. And I know that's what I've always tried to do.
Robin, in the leadership position, you have a lot of employees, right? You have a lot of people working, as you said, the journalists, the anchors, the reporters, but people not even on TV in production. I worked in production. I mean, there's so many of us that work in news that maybe people at home have no idea how many people it takes to put on a show and how many people it takes to get a story, not necessarily just get the story, but to get the information right, because we have to check through so many people. So I guess my question to you is, how do you instill those leadership roles into employees, and how do you make them all, because not everybody is motivated. You know, there are times where you get comfortable in your position. In my previous job, I was comfortable and I was like, no, this is great. Why am I going to do anything else? It wasn't until something kind of snapped where I said, do I really want to do this for the rest of my life? So when you see employees like that, or people like that who are kind of like stuck and you know they can do more and better, how do you sort of push them a little bit?
You know, I think being honest with people and clear about expectations is part of that. I've met a lot of people who are just fine doing exactly what they're doing. They want to be the best at what they're doing right now, but they're not necessarily looking at the next thing, and that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that if you are excellent at the thing that you're doing. But I also know a lot of people who get frustrated because they feel like there's something more and they don't know how to get there. And I think part of my job as a manager, as a leader, you know, is to help people see what those possible paths are, and to help give them the tools and the experiences that allow them to get there. It's also to listen and to know, you know, what is it that people want out of their careers, and how can I help them you know, find the path that's going to be the right one for them. You know, I had a lot of people along the way who challenged me by, you know, asking me tough questions about myself and things that I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. And I've tried to pay that forward. I mentor a whole host of people. And I do that even though sometimes I'm like, I don't have time for this. What am I doing? I do that though, because people did that for me. And I think that paying it forward and taking the time to help people really figure out how they can find their why, how they can find that passion and that mission that drives them forward, and then how they can position themselves so that they can be successful doing it. Like I said, I never said I'm going to be the chief news officer or I'm going to be the editor in chief. Like, there were never things I ever remember saying. But every time I would take another step, another door would open, and I had to decide, am I ready to go through that door? Is this the right door for me? What can I accomplish? How does it help me with that mission and that passion that I have? And I found that, sort of stumbling through my career has been a good way to do this. I know some people have like the 5-year plans and the 10-year plans, and I root for them because I think that's terrific. It's great to have that intention and to be clear about what you want. I just never had it. I just knew that I wanted more, and that I wanted more, not just for myself, but for the organizations where I worked.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Now I'm going to go to a question from Susie. Susie says, what is the most impressive thing you have ever seen a student/intern do, and why?
Gosh, we've had a ton of wonderful interns in different places where I've worked over the years, but the ones that I have appreciated the most are actually the ones who ask the tough questions, right? They don't walk into the organization necessarily. You know, sometimes they may think they know more than they do, but they're willing to listen. But they're also willing to push. They're willing to say, I want to jump in and do this big thing, right? They are, they're raising their hand and saying, here's what I want to get out of my internship. Here's what I want to get out of this experience. And they're being clear and trying to design that in a way that it's beneficial to the organization and it's beneficial to them. I have seen, I remember I've seen a number of our student reporters who've come in as interns, who, you know, we put them on the street just like any other reporter. In an internship with the McClatchy Newsroom, you are a reporter the day you walk in. We put guardrails around and make sure you've got good editors and mentors and people who are going to support you. And, you know, certainly we spend a lot more time trying to get the work that you have ready, so that we can make it work. But it's the reporters who come in fearless and curious and constantly asking questions. They show up at the news meetings and they're asking, you know, their bosses afterwards, okay, why did you make this decision? How did you make this decision? They're the ones who are really trying to kind of like understand how everything works, so that they can absorb that and really make that a part of what they do. Those are the ones that impress me the most. And they're usually the ones who do the best work over the course of the summer or the term that they're interning with us.
Robin, this business can be, this is just me speaking now, this business can be a bit cutthroat at times. It can be very hard. A lot of times, I'll speak from experience, you find instead of people trying to lift each other up, and I'm going to speak and say we as in women, instead of women trying to lift each other up, they spend all this time trying to tear each other down. Or why did she get this position? Why did this one get that? Why is this one doing this? What would you say to the women listening? How would you say we need to work on lifting each other up rather than tearing each other down?
Yeah, I love the concept of shine theory, right? That we all shine when we shine a spotlight on others. And I really have always felt like, you know, I have a responsibility to help do that for others. And I have seen that not every woman that I've worked with has had that same concept. When I first became a leader, I was almost always the only woman in a room, right? I was the first to take on, first editor-in-chief in a number of different places to be a woman, and to take on those roles. And the good news is that's changed, right? The majority of people coming out of journalism and communication schools are women now, and more women are taking leadership roles. I now sit on an executive team that's 40% women, and my leadership team in our news division is 80% women. And but in those early years, I often felt alone, and I often felt like I had to interrupt or interject to be heard in certain settings. And the good news is I don't feel that way anymore. I've earned my place, and my voice is valued and respected. And I've really worked to try to make sure that I make room for others, both women and others whose voices have not always been heard. And I think that that's a critical thing. And when I see people who aren't doing that, you know, I will point it out to them. You know, I will point out that that was an opportunity that was missed. And I think it takes more people being willing to call that out and to challenge people when they aren't making that space for others. Because somebody had to make that space for them. I can tell you, somebody had to make that space for me, for you, for all of us. And so if we aren't doing it for others, we are creating a future where it doesn't exist. And so I just feel like it's really critical. I still think there's challenges for women in a whole lot of settings, both with each other and, in many organizations that aren't like mine, where the voices aren't heard or they aren't valued in the same way. So we have to keep working on it, and it has to be intentional. It cannot be something that we just hope will happen one day.
I agree. Okay, we have a question from Claire. Do you believe that learned leadership qualities are more important than natural leadership abilities?
That's a good question. And I'm not sure I totally know the answer. I feel like, I didn't feel like a natural leader when I started taking on leadership roles, but somebody else clearly did. You know, somebody else felt like, this is somebody who can do this job, and asked me to do it. And it was years before I really started taking classes. I mean, I got thrown into leadership roles when there was no academy that helped teach me how to be a good manager, how to be a good leader. I learned by doing. I learned by making a lot of mistakes. I learned by finding mentors and finding people who would support me. I learned by identifying what I didn't want to be. I had some managers, and many of us have had those, who we can say, when I'm in this role, I'm going to do the exact opposite. And I learned a lot that way. I also have a wonderful set of mentors. Most of them are women, not all of them. Most of them are women, who shared their lessons with me. And I think that's been a huge thing. I'm going to pull out a book. One of my very favorite books is by Jill Geisler. She works right now as a professor at I can't remember which university. I'll have to look it up again. But she used to work at the Poynter Institute, and she's been a friend of mine for 20 years. It's called Work Happy: What Great Bosses Know. And you'll see I've got a bazillion little bookmarks in here. I've read this book over and over and over again. It is a wonderful book that helps to remind me of Loyola. That's right, Loyola at Chicago for Jill. She runs incredible workshops. She has been a mentor and a leader for me, and someone who both has taught me things, but also has been someone who has led by example. And I've gotten the opportunity to get to know her really well. You got to find those people in your life who will see you for who you are, who are willing to tell you when you're not hitting the marks, and are willing to help give you their knowledge and experience, and share their experiences in order to be able to to grow. And Jill has been that for me. I've had a number of other leaders who've been that for me, and that squad of mostly women, but also a few men who have been there for me over the years. I call on them frequently, and I've tried to be that for other people too.
Robin, with all that you do with your life, with your children, with your husband, work life, personal life, everything that you do, my question to you is, how do you relieve stress?
That's a great question. And I haven't always been very good at that. I have gone through periods where I have been, as tight as a rubber band, as far as you can pull it. But for me, there's a few things. One, I have to get outside, and I have to spend time outdoors. And so pretty much every morning, my husband and I drive to a little park that's a couple miles from our house, and we walk a 2.5-mile path. And there are ducks, and there are geese, and it is the leaves are falling right now, and they're beautiful. And that's how I start my day. Sometimes that is at 6 o'clock in the morning before the sun is even up. If we do whatever we can to have that time together. It's sort of our connection time. And then to be able to feel like I've gotten a little exercise, I've gotten a feeling of being, because I work in my house now. And so other than me and my dog, who's actually back behind me sleeping and snoring right now, it's just the two of us a lot of times. And being able to get out and have that fresh air is really important. The other thing that that I do is I have to turn it off sometimes. Sometimes I've got to just say, I am turning it off. I have wonderful people who can answer the questions, who can do the things that need to get done. I'm taking a vacation. These are the only ways you can reach me, but don't do it unless you really need to. And again, that's about setting an example. It's really important that I'm able to do that. I also like to cook. So when I can, I am making food and trying to, find new recipes and use a little creativity that is not about, trying to solve the media world's problems or whatever, deal with whatever crisis is at hand. And so, I try to prioritize those things. I'll still say, there are times where I get to the end of the week and I am just mentally exhausted. Mm-hmm. And I am still trying to find the right outlets to be able to recharge fully. But I admire those who are able to do that well.
It's not easy. I mean, speaking from experience too, when you're around news, you're around a lot of bad news. You're not around a lot of good news, and it can be so hard and so draining. For me personally, I do 4, 5, 6, and 11, the shows, the times, and sometimes when we have a bad story at 4, I'll look over at my co-anchor, Calvin, and I'll tell him, I don't know if I can hear that again at 5. That was a tough one. So you sometimes, you know the story, but sometimes I sort of like just flip the switch when I know the parts of the story that are so just hard to hear for so many. So I can imagine, you too, you're around it all the time. It is very hard. You got to find things to do because your personal life will also suffer when you deal with things like that on a day-to-day basis. Okay,
And
Robin, we have oh, go ahead.
it's important to remember as a journalist that, you know, these stories that are hard for us just to listen and watch, those are people's lives, and that's what they're living. You know, I had a situation in my life. My sister and her fiance died in a fire, and it was a really terrible situation. And all of a sudden I was on the other side of the news, and I was, you know, people were asking me for comment, and we were talking about, you know, we were having to talk about their lives. And you know, for years afterwards, I couldn't read a story about a fire and someone dying in that way without like having to stop and like leave the room and like catch my breath, because it was real to me in a different way. And I think that as journalists, people assume that we're like immune to that. We're not. We're human beings, and you know, it is hard. And sometimes, you know, you do have to figure out a way to kind of like, you know, turn it off and clear out the noise, because it's a lot sometimes.
Yeah, I just had a well, not just, but he'll be 2 next month. And now any sort of like baby story on the news,
Oh, yeah.
I'm nope, can't deal with them. They hit so differently now, and it's just it's tough. It can be very tough. Robin, we have a question from Marie. Her question is, what advice would you give to someone who wants to start in the journalism business? What should be the first step? For example, radio stations or podcasts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first step is finding people who you admire and studying their work. Figuring out what is it about what they're doing that that you appreciate, right? And being able to dissect that a little bit, and then starting to figure out how you can connect yourself and put yourself in places where you can try to do some of that work, right? You know, whether that's, you know, through internships or, you know, just taking that entry level job so that you can, just be in that environment and be around people who are doing something that you find really valuable. You know, there's so many ways that you can become a storyteller on a whole bunch of different platforms that don't involve going to work for a media organization right now. But I do think it's valuable to learn from those who are professionals who have worked hard to develop an instinct for what connects with an audience, right? It's not enough to be able to write a great story. You've got to figure out how to write a story that will actually write or record or build a video package that will connect with people. And that takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of instincts. And it's not, I always say journalism, you know, they say, is it a craft? Or is it a profession, something that you can learn? And I say you have to learn journalism by doing it, and you learn it by being around other people who do it well. You know, I remember when I was a reporter in my first newsroom, I was anxious about doing interviews. I mean, I would actually have heart palpitations before I had to get on an interview, a tough interview with somebody. And I sat next to an investigative reporter, and I remember I used to get on the phone and pretend like I was on a phone call. I wasn't, and listen to his interviews. And I would take notes on what he was doing and how he was doing it. And he was my master class in doing the tough interview. And by listening to him and, mimicking it at times, and then asking him, okay, I heard you do this, I tried not to do it too often, but I heard you ask this question. How did you get there? Like, why did you ask that this way? What did you know? He would always say, you don't ask a question, you don't ask a tough question, you don't already know some of the answer, because then you can tell whether the person's telling you the truth or not. But finding those people who will teach you, I think, is the most critical part of learning to be a journalist right now.
And we have a question from Tatiana. She says, what do women newly entering the field of communication need to know now to be innovative and take the lead?
I think it's primarily that you need to be willing to experiment. We are in such a time of dramatic change and transformation in this industry. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that the pace of change is actually only going to get faster, and you have to be constantly learning and constantly adapting. My CEO likes to say, time is our enemy. And I think that's really true. We have to learn to move faster. We have to be willing to try things, but also evaluate what we learned from those. one of the things that I think a lot of people are really interested in is like AI is now becoming a major question, a major discussion in our newsrooms about what role does that play in how we create news, right? I personally think that there is work that is essentially human, right? Is being able to tell a story that connects with people is an essentially human function. But there are a lot of things that I do every day and that our journalists do every day that aren't, right? That there are technologies and tools that can help them do it better, help them be faster. We use AI right now in a number of different ways, but one of those is actually to analyze massive data sets and to help connect dots and find answers that honestly a human isn't very well prepared to do. And so it's being willing to jump in and try new things, but also understand what is essentially human, what is essentially part of the craft, and figuring out how to balance between those. I look in the last 25 years at how much journalism has changed. And I think in the next 25, it's going to change even more. It's going to change even faster. And so the people I know who I think are going to be the most successful are the ones who are adaptable and they're excited about the new things that are coming up and they're willing to try things, but they also understand what is core to our mission and our purpose, what is the core value that we have, and they're always trying to make sure that they're applying any of those things against those values and ensuring that we're making the right decisions.
So this next question, Robin, I resonate with Sophia. So Sophia is asking, was it extremely hard to give up the caregiving duties to someone other than yourself? Sometimes I feel the mom guilt between letting someone take care of mom duties and my duties at work.
It was. And again, I had been a single mom for my first son. And so we have a bond to this day that is different than the bond that I have with my younger son. But it's actually also kind of wonderful because, again, I have a wonderful partnership with my husband, and we view our marriage, our relationship, our family as a partnership. And knowing that he could have that same experience and that relationship that he and my youngest son have is just as special as the relationship that I have with my oldest son, actually turned out to be really rewarding. I will tell you, mommy guilt is real. It's pervasive. My kids are grown and I still have it constantly. I actually had mommy guilt over my oldest son adopted a dog and I have not gotten to see my grand dog yet. And I feel guilty about that. So it doesn't go away. Like, it's always going to be there. But I also think we have to give ourselves grace. Like I learned early on with my oldest son, as I was trying to juggle all of these things and trying to do all of it well, that I wasn't doing all of it well. There were times where I was not the best parent. And but I also learned that that's okay sometimes. That's okay sometimes. Sometimes we have to be real about what it is that we can and can't accomplish. And our kids actually get a lot from that. They want to see us as human beings and not as perfect creatures who always do the right thing. And I think that's a lesson that it took me a while to learn.
I have mommy guilt because I didn't take my son to the park today because I was getting ready for this and I didn't have time. So I get it.
It never goes away. It never goes away.
Okay, this one is from Ariana. She says, who are people you follow and admire that you would recommend others learn from?
Gosh. So I, now that I'm primarily sort of in the leadership field, I have a lot of leaders in news who I have a lot of respect for. Many of them probably names that you all might not know, but they're people that I've connected with. Sally Busby, who's the editor of the Washington Post, is one of those. I think she's a tremendous leader. Nancy Barnes, who's the editor of the Boston Globe. I think she's a tremendous leader. She actually used to be the editor down here in Raleigh. And so we've been on some boards together. It's interesting when I think about the people who I really admire, so many of them have been in roles that were similar to mine and took the time to really invest in me. And so that admiration, was earned by many of them. I have a lot of journalists that I really admire too, reporters who are out there making it happen day in and day out and breaking news. I had the privilege last week of going to the Pulitzer Prize dinner because one of our newsrooms, Miami Herald, won, I think it was their 24th or 25th Pulitzer. You know, getting to be in a room with people who do that level of work, and many of whom, you know, this wasn't their first, it was their second or their third or their fourth. You know, it reminds me of the legacy and the history that comes with these roles, and the importance of what we do and the impact that it can have. And so, you know, I'm always, you know, looking at who is winning those awards. What are they doing differently? How is it that they got there? You know, what was the process? I love to ask people, how did you get that story? How did you get that story? Because I think it's that kind of experiential learning that helps everybody. It helps everybody to figure out how to do it better. But it also, you know, it's part of the community. I said when I walked into a newsroom the first time, I felt this sense of community. I felt like I'd found my tribe, and I know a lot of people like that. I know a lot of journalists who are like, I got into this because of the people and, you know, the connection that I made. And I think that journalists, you know, at their heart, you know, wanna be supportive of other journalists. And so finding people like that who are willing to invest time in you, I think is one of the best things you can do for yourself.
Valentina says, how did the things you learn or even mistakes allow you to figure out your life plans or the next steps?
Yeah, I mean, I have learned so many things by making so many mistakes, and I've always tried to be really authentic and vulnerable with other people so that they see that, because I think it's important that we all understand that it is through sometimes trying something and failing that we really learn how to succeed. You know, I feel like I've been lucky to be able to have people around me who would catch me at times. And I always tell people, if you're looking for your first job, don't look at what, you know, where it is, what the name of the institution is. Look at who your boss is going to be and how have they developed other people, and where have people who've gone there gone after that, right? Because it's that relationship that'll be the most transformational for you in those first few years, the person who's going to help invest in you and make you better. And I think a lot of people try to make decisions based on prestige, or they make it based off of, you know, I'm going to this big market and I think that's going to be great, and that's fine. But generally, the people that I know who've done that, they don't get as much out of it, and they often find themselves tired and burned out way earlier in their career than many others. And so I think that's an important way to think about it.
Okay, Robin, we have about 3 minutes left. I'm going to ask you one final question. What do you think it's going to take for more women to hold leadership roles?
I think it's going to take more people, women and men, making space for women. I think it's going to take that recognition and understanding that that it's okay that women can take a different path sometimes, right? A lot of women do decide they want to stay home with their kids for a few years, and for many years, if you did that, you took yourself off the track, and it made it that much harder for you to actually get somewhere. I actually look at that as a benefit now. When I see somebody who took a few years to take care of their family or to, you know, prioritize their life, and then they come back in, they're more centered, they're more mature in many ways, they're more ready for whatever comes after. But I think it's that, you know, it's being able to buck whatever, you know, patterns that have developed over the years from people who weren't sensitive to that. It's you know, employing that shine theory and making sure that we're lifting people up and that we're making space for people at the table, so that they are able to have those, you know, to have their voices be heard and valued. I think that that's got to be critical too. You know, and I think it's being willing to ask for what we need. And I think a lot of women wait for someone to give them what they think they deserve. And sometimes it's as simple as saying, I need this. This is important to me. And a lot of times we're not willing to ask. And I think it's important for all of us to make sure that we do that. I always tell any woman who comes to me and says, is trying to say, I need a raise or something. I tell them, thank you for asking. Thank you for asking. I don't know if I can give it to you. I got to figure that out, but thank you for asking, because you need to be the one who advocates for yourself, because no one else is going to do that for you.
I love it. Women quite literally need to take the lead.
Take the lead.
Robin, thank you so much. I appreciate everything we had a chance to chat about and all the questions. I mean, you were wonderful. I've learned so much from you, and I appreciate it very much. So thank you, Robin.
Thanks, Nicole.
Okay, now I'm going to go ahead with our thought leaders, and I'm first going to introduce Kim Voet, and then we'll let Kim speak, and then we'll do some chatting with Kim and some questions, and then we'll go on to our next thought leader. So let's go now to Kim Voet. She is the president and general manager of CBS News and stations, local businesses in Miami, including WFOR TV, CBS Miami, WBFS TV, the CBS News Miami streaming channel, and CBSMiami.com. Voet joined CBS Miami following 26 years with WDIV-TV, the NBC affiliate in Detroit, where she served as the news director since March 2011. During that time, the station was named the Michigan Association of Broadcasters Station of the Year for 9 consecutive years, won 2 National Edward R. Murrow Awards, including the 2022 Award for Best Newscast, and received 2 National Association of Broadcasters Service to America Awards. Voet began her career at WDIV in 1997 as producer of the station's 11 p.m. newscast. She then worked her way up the ladder by becoming nightside executive producer, then executive producer of special projects, senior executive producer, and assistant news director. Her background also includes news producer positions and stations in St. Louis, Detroit, Greensboro, and Winston-Salem. Voet earned her bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism from the University of Missouri, Columbia. Welcome, Kim Voet.
Thanks so much, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, Kim, your rise to the top has been, I want to say, similar to mine. You sort of started from the bottom and worked your way up. What is your biggest message to the young journalists that we have on how to get to the top? Not necessarily your specific position or mine, but theirs, where they want to go. How do they get to the top?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of what we just heard from Robin, but the message that I always throw out there is raise your hand. Raise your hand, raise your hand. And when I say that, don't wait for somebody to ask you to do something. Raise your hand and say, hey, pick me for this assignment. Pick me to do this. I think too many times in this fast-paced world that we lived in, people will sit at their desks and say, oh, I know that, if they want me to do it, they're going to come ask me to do it. I had a conversation with somebody this week, and I said, you can create your own destiny to a certain extent in what we do, but we move so fast. There's so much happening all the time. The decision makers, if you will, are looking for people to make those decisions for them. So I would say, as you're starting out in your career, the best advice I ever got was to raise my hand and say, pick me for this. Pick me for this assignment. Pick me for this opportunity. Even if it's something that doesn't 100% interest you, do it, because then they'll come back to you. The decision makers will come back to you time and time again, because they see you as an eager person who wants to do more. It was really good advice for me. And, I can name a couple of things in my career that really were a difference maker because I raised my hand.
If you had to talk to your younger self during a time when you were raising your hand, trying to be seen, trying to be known, what would you say to yourself?
Oh, gosh, there's so much. So much. I would say also understand, knowing what I know now, understand that it's not all about you, which is really hard for us to do sometimes because, we get into this business for the greater good. I heard, Robin talked about it quite a bit, but sometimes we take things way too personally. Decisions are made constantly, every single day, every single hour. And I would tell my younger self, you know what, don't take that so personally. And number one. And number two, never compare yourself to your colleagues. Never compare yourself to your colleagues. It's something that I did early on until somebody kind of, got my head on straight. And I will tell you, as a manager and as a leader in the newsroom, I see it all the time. And the comparisons that we do in newsrooms or in life in general can really set you back, both from like a mental point of view and just from a career point of view. Because, by the way, when you compare yourself with your colleague, 9 chances out of your 10, your colleague isn't telling you everything that's true.
I agree. So I asked Robin this question. I want to ask it to you because you see this and you see the women that work under you and all of us women that put on the news every day. How do we go about stopping women from tearing each other down? You say don't compare yourself. So what is it that you tell the talent that you have out there working, don't worry about what so and so is doing? How do you go about telling people to lift each other up, and we're not fighting each other, we're all one team?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question, and it is very challenging, because if you get into this business, you're generally a type A individual. You're not a wallflower usually that stands on the sideline. But I think you really have to look at it as a team approach. I look at it in everything that I do as a team approach. I use a ton of sports analogies, almost to the point of ridiculousness, when we're discussing things and making decisions, day in and day out. But I think that, for me, it's okay to be very direct about that. And I think sometimes it's benefited us as a whole in places where I've worked, if we've been very direct about that. Not mean, big difference, not mean, but very direct about, pointing out when people are doing what you're talking about there, Nicole. Because sometimes I will argue people don't necessarily recognize that they're bringing each other down. So I think being direct and calling that out is a way to put an end to it. And, knowing when to pick your battles with people.
Kim, what would you attribute your success to, and everything along the way of how you got here?
Well, raising my hand a lot, being open. I think when I started out, everybody's got their own goals and what have you. I was willing to do anything and try everything. I think it's extremely important, especially in 2023, not to pick just one thing that you can do in this business, whether it's newspaper or TV or any kind of business for that matter. If you can only do one skill set, I think that limits you. For me, I learned to do everything. I learned how to do every single job in the newsroom. Can't do them all now. They wouldn't want me to do them now. But I literally learned to do every single job in the newsroom. And that really helped me in my career, because I became a utility player in ways that maybe one of my colleagues couldn't. So it added my value. And then after that, I could hone my skill once, I had experience under my belt in a particular area.
What was it that clicked for you when you said, you know what, I don't want to be a producer anymore. I don't want to be an EP anymore. I want to be the president. I want to be the GM. Like, what did you?
I didn't say that. Honestly, I didn't say that. I really, really enjoy my job as a news director. I mean, to me, that was like where I wanted to be. And I never, ever anticipated moving beyond that. But then when I realized I could have even a bigger impact, to me, it's all about impact and what we do. I am a true, journalism drives me. And journalism is just like Robin. It's the reason I get up in the morning. It's the reason I stayed up way last night dealing with what was going on in Maine. And when I had an opportunity to take, my skill set as a journalist and take it to the next level in this position, you got to remember, most presidents and general managers were never news people until recently. They've always been salespeople or, you know, research people or something like that. It was all about the business of what we do. And I would say this has been a trend maybe in the past 5 years where news directors have started becoming, you know, general managers of television stations. And, you know, I think that having somebody talk to me about the impact I could have even at a larger level, you know, looking at how the business is changing, that's what made me decide to do that. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I've only been in this job for 3 months. And if you had told me a year ago I'd be a general manager, I probably wouldn't have, I would have totally disagreed with you because I was extremely, extremely happy being a news director at the station I was at with the people I worked with. But I think having that opportunity, you know, you talked about this, how do you get a seat at the table, right? How do more and more women get a seat at the table? This is how more and more women get a seat at the table. By taking on those challenges, taking on those positions that can give you a bigger voice in what you do.
So I know it's only been 3 months, but what's your goal with CBS? Like, how do you go about trying to make it different from, you know, my station, Channel 7, Channel 6?
Yeah, well, you know, that's a really great question. I mean, you know, part of it is, you know, learning about South Florida. I mean, you know, I truly believe that local television stations need to be ingrained in the community. You know, the goals, I would say the goal are the 3 things here. It's all about producing better content. It's all about, and when I say that, stories that really matter to people. I think that many times, and I think you would agree with me on this, Nicole, we just do stories, but we don't recognize the connection that they can have to people. And again, Robin alluded to that a little bit. So it's telling better stories. It's really evolving too. I think that, you know, I don't refer to this as a television station anymore. I refer to this as a news and information station because we don't do just television anymore. And if the more people, you know, it's hard changing habits. So I think it's evolving the station. And then, you know, for me and for, you know, kind of the company mantra that we're in with CBS is to make it a good place to work. You know, it's no secret, CBS went through some extremely significant changes several years ago. I don't hide it. I would never have taken a call from CBS 4 years ago. And, you know, I'm very impressed. You know, everybody should know that the leadership at CBS is all women now. All women. And I'm not saying that's the reason I joined, but I mean, you know, I think it's important to find a place where you can work and you can have a voice. Now, again, that goes back to raising your hand and what have you, but you know, to make you know, make the workplace a good place to work where you can't please everybody, but make it a place where people actually feel like they can have value in what they do. I'm extremely transparent, like to a fault. And, you know, what we do is tough. I mean, we spend more time at our stations than we do with our families. And there's no reason to make it any tougher.
My question to you would be, what's the feedback you've received? I know it hasn't been a lot of time. It's only been 3 months, but what's the feedback you've received from the people who work for you? From, you know, what's the chatter you hear about that actually all women leadership team? I mean, that's impressive.
Well, they haven't really figured me out yet because I'm not like the old guys guard. You know, I think what I've heard time and time again, you know, I'm in the process of literally meeting with every single employee here at the television station. From the lead anchor down to the part-time writer. I'm going to meet with every single person here. And the one thing that I will say time and time again that I hear is just, you know, I've never talked to the general manager before. You know, I appreciate the fact that you're very honest with us about what we're doing right and what are the challenges ahead. I think to be a good leader in this business, you have to be very transparent and open with the all departments, not just the newsroom, but all departments about expectations. So, I don't think it's so much, oh my gosh, we have a woman leading our station. It's about, oh my gosh, we have somebody that actually knows my name, and somebody that says hi to me in the halls, and somebody that comes down to the newsroom and knows what we're doing and actually cares about what we're doing and everything. And I'm not saying my predecessors didn't do that, but that's what I'm hearing, and that's what I try to put out there to make sure everybody knows that, hey, if we're asked to do something challenging, I want you to know why we're asked to do something challenging.
What do you think some of the qualities someone would need to be a leader? What do you think they are?
Well, I think you have to have an understanding of the people around you. I will say I'm not necessarily the smartest person in the room always, but I surround myself with people who understand things that I don't. So I think it's really important as a leader that you surround and have people with you on your team who are very smart around you. I think transparency is critical in being a leader. I think that if you are transparent with people, they have a better understanding about some of the decisions you make and why you're making those decisions. And I think it's okay to be direct and honest with people as well. One of the things I learned midway through my career is none of us like to be told what to do, right? I disagree. We want to be told what to do from a position of growth. We want to be told what to do and how to do it rather than just, figuring it out ourselves. And a good leader is somebody who lets everybody know, hey, this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to go down this road. This is how we're going to be. This is what we're going to do in a month. This is what we're going to do in 3 months, and so on and so on. So those expectations are there and laid out rather than just saying, okay, today's Thursday. What are we going to do today? So I think you have to have, I hate to say the word vision because that just sounds so, it's a word, but I think you have to lay out expectations for people so people understand what the path is ahead.
I couldn't agree more. Kim, thank you so much. I'm going to bring in our second thought leader now, Christine Barney. Christine is CEO and managing partner of RBB Communications, a triple threat agency repeatedly recognized as champions in the field of PR, digital marketing, and creative services. Recently, RBB was among top 5 global creative agencies of the year. The Provoke US Small Agency of the Year named to the Forbes top PR firms and took home campaign honors in every competition entered. RBB is a certified women-owned business with a diverse team across a broad spectrum of crafts, including healthcare, consumer services, products, energy and renewables, B2B professional services, and travel. Barney is the author of the Breakout Brand Strategy, an evolutionary approach to creating customer passion, and her firm, headquartered in Miami with a presence in Los Angeles and New York, is known as the champion of breakout brands. Barney's innovative management style and employee-driven workplace philosophy makes the firm a repeated winner in Best Place to Work rankings. She's active in her community, having served as founding chair of the South Florida Business Council, past chair of the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce, current board member of the Orange Bowl Committee, Officers Cabinet of the Beacon Council, member of the International Women's Forum, Leadership Florida, and the Florida 500. She's a member of the Page Society and is accredited by the Public Relations Society of America, where she received the 2016 Bill Adams PRSA Lifetime Achievement Award. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you. And I apologize. I haven't been on. I've had a terrible cold and I'm coughing a lot, so I didn't want to be distracting. So
oh, no, you're okay. Thank you, Christine. Thank you for pushing through for all of us because we greatly appreciate it. Christine, what do you think it takes to be a leader?
Well, I would summarize it. Excuse me. I sort of put it into 5 components. One is that real leaders don't boss people around, and especially in a business like mine, where it's a very collaborative environment. They're saying, hey, this is your expertise. I'm here to run in front and knock down obstacles that get in your way, not backseat drive. So, people shouldn't have to earn your trust. They should only have to lose it. 2nd would be that we don't bark out orders. You may have a goal in mind, but but it should be more of, is that something we can do? Or what do you need from me to make it easy to reach that goal? Third is you don't blame others if something goes wrong. I find so many times managers say, well, Jack got this wrong. He's lazy. He didn't pay attention to details. But I would say if you're the manager, you're the leader, you brought Jack in, you onboarded Jack. And until you take responsibility for whether Jack is succeeding or not, you're going to stay frustrated. You don't look at lettuce withering in your garden and say, wow, what a lousy crop of lettuce. You have to really be able to think about, am I creating conditions for others to succeed? And then don't chicken out on the tough conversations. Real leaders know that during their leadership, they're going to have to stand up. You're going to have to stand up for your team members. In my business, sometimes that means firing the client, not the employee. You have to stand up for your integrity, and you have to stand up for what's right, whether it's, in your business or in your personal life. And you have to be able to tell the truth. We've heard a lot of people today talk about transparency. And I can't remember who who also said about going direct, but it's also important to do it without what was called triangulation. Meaning you don't talk about your problems with someone else. You have to talk about it directly with the person. And if you don't feel heard, you take it up to the next level. And a real leader will stand up not only for themselves, but for others and their team. And that may sound like a lot of different rules, for leadership, but I think of that as they're very similar to what you're going to need to be successful in life. Be bold, be truthful, learn every day, treat others as you wish to be treated, stand up. And a lot of people have talked about books, and there's only one book that's been on my desk for the full 30 years plus of my career, and it's called The No A-Hole Rule by Robert Sutton. And the reason is because people always say that women leaders are softer, but I believe that if you don't tolerate jerks in the workplace, that's good for business, and it's going to be good for your life. And you have to think about am I the kind of leader that's ensuring that this is an environment where there are not going to be any jerks and where we all succeed.
So Christine, not a lot of people have the, I would say, courage to whatever's bottled up inside of them, speak out on it. So what would you say to young women who in any place of work who feel like, wow, they go home and they tell their significant other or their mom or whoever, man, I feel all of these things, but I don't feel like comfortable enough to tell someone of authority or upper management. What do you say to that person?
I agree that it's harder to be direct when you have levels of difference. If you're several levels below someone, to be able to come to them directly is a challenge. But almost every organization has people who can mentor you or people who can be those mid-level managers that you should be able to go to for advice. And the right manager will say, I'm not going to do this for you unless it's, of course, we got a harassment charge or whatnot, but I'm going to guide you through how to have this conversation. And the other thing that I would say to a young woman is you have to do it. If you do it in real time, I know a lot of times managers don't even realize they're doing it. So I'm having a conversation with you and I keep interrupting you. And as a young manager, you can say, I'm having a hard time keeping all these notes because when you interrupt me, I lose my train of thought. Can we go back to what you just said? And can I go back to what I was telling you about? If you can do it in real time, where you point out what's going to help you be more successful, it's not perceived as whining or I'm the millennial who can't take criticism. It's perceived as this is how we have to work together. And you should also be careful about knowing the right communication methods. Some people are going to be much better face-to-face. Some people are going to be better if after the meeting, you send them an email saying, here's what I took away from the meeting. Oh, and by the way, if it's easier for you, I prefer to work with notes. So if you can give me notes beforehand, that would make me more productive rather than putting me on the spot. So knowing how to communicate, managing up is important, but it is hard. But I kept hearing, the others say, you have to raise your hand, and you have to raise your hand not only in good times, but in bad times.
I think sometimes young women, sometimes people will say, oh, great job on that story pitch, or great job in the store the other day. I liked how you helped that customer, whatever field of work you're in. What do you think it's going to take? Because me personally, I feel like sometimes women do not receive these compliments and actually believe them. I think we have that negative little person on your shoulder there that says, "Oh, they just gave me a compliment, but I don't really believe it. Yeah, I could do this so much better."
Right.
What do you think it's going to take for young women or just women or anybody to believe a compliment and move on with your day and feel proud of yourself?
I think it just like when you think about the things that you'll remember in life that were important to you, you take a picture of that wedding you went to, your graduation, all those important things. You have to think about feedback as something that you need to immortalize. I tell all my employees they should have 2 folders in their email, and there should be a folder. I actually have 3. I have one that says personal kudos. I have one that says professional and client kudos. And then I have a folder that says lessons learned. And when I get feedback and someone sends me an email and says, that was great, or I walk into a meeting and when I was younger and they handed me a on the spot award, I would take a picture of it. I would email it to that folder, even if I didn't believe it. And then once a month in my calendar, it says, review your folders. And when you see it all there, it starts to paint a picture for you. These are the things I get complimented on a lot. Well, I'm always complimented on how I'm on time. I'm always complimented on how my work is so complete. And then I look at my lessons learned file and I go, gee, a lot of people are telling me to speak up more, that I should present more my opinions more aggressively in meetings. And if you think about the balancing act, it's sometimes easier to accept when you're also spending time looking at what you can improve versus what you can grow on. But it is hard. I think everyone here has mentioned the imposter complex. I had the same. When I first started at the agency, I was 26 years old and I became a partner very quickly because I could sell business. My other 2 partners were 20 and 25 years older than me. And we would walk into meetings and the name of the firm was Reuben, Barney and Berger. And people would say, are you related to Barney? Are you married to Berger? Are you the daughter of Reuben? And, and at first I used to feel like, oh my God, I have so much to prove. But after a while, I sort of thought it was funny. One, I had to get my answers to make them feel less uncomfortable about insulting me. And also just in my own mind start to say, I'm also very tiny. You can't tell on Zoom, but I'm barely 5 feet tall. And so it's, here's this little girl, I used to wear my hair up in a severe bun to try and look older and and then I realized once they hear me talk, they're going to get it. And I got to give them the pass that they're not going to treat me differently. You are young. Everyone on this call, you don't have the gravitas of someone 10 years older, but you can impress them with being prepared, being on time, and being a good presenter of your ideas and standing up. And believe me, that does make a difference. The other part comes with time.
I love that. Now, I do have a question from the audience, but I just wanted to say when I started at this station 7.5 years ago, I was a traffic reporter in the mornings, and I was so nervous, and I kept talking myself out of it. I can't do this. I can't do it. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done traffic. My mom at the time left me a handwritten note. You can do this. You can do this. You're strong. Just keep doing what you do every single day. And I took that note and I put it right on my desk. And to this day, that I stare at that note every single day whenever there's a small little doubt that creeps in that I can't do something or I can't interview this person because they're much older than I am, much more experienced, much smarter. So I appreciate that answer. Okay, we have a question from Sasha who says, what technological skills and knowledge are needed for careers in the field right now to be a leader and to be paid well?
Well, I think it depends on which field you're talking about because they're slightly different. But I would say in any field, I would say to you, you have to think about what your brand is. And one of the things that I find young people resistant to is you have to be in a place like a LinkedIn where older folks like me want to go and validate who you are. And we want to see in a cogent way that you can tell your story, that you've listed your technology. For me, I want to know that you understand in your area of expertise. If you're a travel expert, are you certified? Like I have APR. Are you familiar with the influencer tools? Which databases do you use? What are your writing skills? And all of that in your LinkedIn page. If you can't go to your LinkedIn page and say, if they never met me, would they hire me from what they see here? You're doing yourself a disservice.
In a leadership position, how important to you is social media? Do you look at somebody's page when you go to hire somebody? Does it matter to you what it looks like, what people post, what young girls are doing? What does it matter to you?
Oh, I'll take that one. I have a simple rule. Don't put on any social media page what you wouldn't want on the 6 o'clock news. This is a big thing with me. I can tell you, I've honestly not hired people because of what I've seen on their social media page. I'm sorry, but when you get into this business, you don't have a private social media page anymore. You've made a choice. You've made a decision to be a journalist, and with that, you lose the privilege of a private social media page. I don't care if it's a different name or what, but you're a representation of the station and you're a representation of the company. And it's one of the first things that I do, or that somebody in the newsroom that I work with does, is we go look at your social pages.
Christine?
I will just say, because you're probably saying, oh my gosh, she's so old, she doesn't care. I'm glad this wasn't around when I was in your position. I'll say it. But I would, I've got a 22-year-old daughter, and I tell her all the time, watch what you post, because it will make a difference in whether you get a job or not.
And I would add to that what I was just talking about having gravitas. If you want people to take you seriously and you're doing videos about your career, but then there's also a video of you chugging beer at a South Beach, spring break, that's not going to tell the story. And in fact, my daughter, she's 26, applied for a job in DC, and having a 7-year review of her social media was part of the qualifications before she could get the job.
Wow. 7 years is a long time.
There are some fields where I do some work in high security areas that require that kind of background check. So it is important, and I don't want to be the old, I know a lot of my employees, for example, they have side gigs where they do, I have one person who does a blog and another person who does a video channel. And again, I'm not saying you can't do those things, but you have to think about the 360-degree picture. If your video blog is called, food porn, as opposed to saying, I'm how to dress for success, you just have to think about what that might mean for your career opportunities.
What would you think would be some downfalls to someone in a leadership position? Like, we talk a lot about the qualities of a leader and the skills that a leader should have. And what would you say some of the opposite? I mean, we don't rarely ever hear that. Like, what would be some of the downfalls someone in a leadership role would make?
Well, I want to point out, because when you ask him the question about how do you make women support each other, to me, it's not what you say, it's what you do. And I want to go back to the no jerks in the workplace. If I'm a leader and I'm saying everyone should collaborate, everyone should support, but there's a person on my team who continually denigrates, continually puts down, and I don't fire that person, I don't put that person on probation, I'm telling everyone that I'm just talking and I don't really mean it. And once you become a leader like that, where people don't believe you, it's going to be a lot harder to lead. So you have to remember, it's not what you say, it's what you do.
Okay, what do you guys think? Go ahead.
Oh no, I just think I also think when you stop, if you're a leader that doesn't listen, that's really bad too. I mean, leaders need to listen. I had a former boss who used to say, sit on your hands. When you want to talk, sit on your hands and listen. And I sit on my hands a lot, especially in the past few months. I've sat on my hands a lot. But, even in my previous role, I mean, listening is, in my opinion, as much a part of the job as anything that we do. And listening with actual listening as opposed to hearing. I mean, two differences. You need to listen to what people are saying as opposed to just letting them talk.
Okay, so Kim, to that, what would you say to someone, an employee who's trying to tell their boss something and their boss is not really listening? What's the advice you give to that person?
Well, again, that's a good question. I mean, I think it depends on I think it depends, on the relationship with their boss. But then I think it's okay, and I really do mean this, for that person to say, to go into their boss and say, I need you to really listen to me. And I know that's hard to say, but, and then if they don't, I mean, I need you to hear me. I need you to understand what I'm talking to you about. Because I've had people do that to me, and it makes you stop and listen. And I think that's okay, especially now, maybe not 15, 20 years ago, but that's okay to say now. We're in a much different time, which I applaud. And then if they're still not listening, I think it's okay to take it to the next level. I really do. Because people in leadership positions, some will listen to what you have to say. I hope it's more would listen, but I understand what you're asking me there, Nicole. And I think sometimes that can be a challenge. But it's different, but make sure you have something of true substance, not just like, hey, I want to raise. That's not, it's got to have something. And I will tell you, the best way to be heard is to have a solution to what you want to talk about. I can't tell you how many times I've gone in and said, here's the issue, here's a proposed solution. And I will tell you 9 times out of 10, the proposed solution is the solution that gets carried out. I will tell you, being vice versa on the other end of it, if Nicole, you come to me with an issue and just drop it on my lap, as opposed to coming with me an issue and having maybe a proposed solution, I'm going to look at it a lot differently.
I think a lot of it too is speaking up in the first place. So we have a follow-up question from Sasha, which I want you both can touch on this. She says, how important is data mapping as a journalist? Is it an advanced skill? Will I get paid more?
Well, get paid more. It's a great skill to have. I'll go back to learning how to do everything in the room. It's a great skill to have. Maybe you're not going to get paid more just because you can data map, but it's a great skill to have, and it enhances your ability to do your job. I am very famous to say, I've got 10 resumes on my desk. This person can report. This person can report and shoot. This person can report, shoot, edit, data map. I don't know, whatever else they can do. I mean, who am I going to hire if they're all equal? So are you going to get paid more? Maybe at the end of the day, but it's more than anything else, it's going to give you a better opportunity to get where you want to be.
Christine, is there anything you want to say? Yeah, about.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I feel like, especially in my field, you have to be a counselor, you have to be a doer, you have to be a strategic thinker, you have to understand creative, you have, because we do integrated comms, you have to have enough of an understanding of all the different disciplines to bring the right tool to the table. We rarely in our field have super specialists who only do one thing. And this goes back to what Kim and others were saying earlier, what Robin was saying earlier, you have to be willing to raise your hand and do everything, because that's what's going to make a difference. And I'm going to say something that maybe not popular, but I find a lot of young women come in with the wrong attitude. With the attitude is, how much can I get right now? And you have to think longer term. I've seen people who turn down jobs because of the difference of like $2,000. Well, I always had it in my head that I would start at $55,000. Well, that's good for you, but that's not what this position pays. And then, the key is that in any job, when you come in and do well, like I know where we are, you can get raises and promotions at any point. If you're good, you will grow. I have VPs who are 27 years old who just kick butt. But if you aren't willing to show that you're willing to come in the door, and that you put yourself in this box, or you've defined yourself as someone who is not open to understanding what your value is, you're going to find yourself at the short end of the stick eventually, because there may be someone willing to pay you now, and a lot of those people hit dead ends or dead walls because they didn't get into the right place.
So go ahead, Kim, if you want to respond.
I would just to say, in addition, because everybody wants to anchor the news and TV, and they want to start out. Well, I'm from Miami, so I want to start out in Miami. I can count on one hand with 4 fingers closed the number of people that have literally gone from an internship to on air in a big market. I would say the best thing you can do for yourself if you want to get into television is learn all those things I've talked about, number one, but then go someplace where you can make mistakes. Go someplace where, yeah, you're not going to make $55,000. I'll tell you right now, there's no possibility you're going to make $55,000 starting in television. It's just not going to happen. You will grow so much personally and professionally that will help you get to where you need to be. You know, I tell everybody all the time when I go back and speak at where I went to school. I remember when I started out and all my friends were making twice what I was making, you know, sitting in a cubicle, doing their job and everything. Then there comes a point in time where it goes like this. And I will tell you, my job is a hell of a lot more interesting than sitting in a cubicle doing the same thing day in and day out. And then there comes a point in time when you're like, oh my gosh, I can't afford to do this, this, and this because all my friends that make more money, that it switches. And then all your friends are jealous of the cool job that you have, where you have a front row seat at history, where you are, you know, informing people. I mean, I can't think of a better career, but it takes time. And you have to be patient. It probably takes, you know, it's the same thing with what Christine does. You don't, there's this notion in this world that, you know, I graduated from college, I should be making six figures. Yeah, the engineers are going to be making six figures. I'll tell you that right now. And you're going to be struggling, but they're going to be bored in about 10 years and you're going to have the coolest job in the world. That's my plug for journalism.
A question to both of you, because we're talking about money and you know, the audience is curious. Do you think it takes, I'll say a woman, just women, do you think it takes for a woman to walk into her boss's office and say, I should make more money, or I need to make more money? Or do you think it needs to be done that way? Or do you think that it's one of these things where the boss is going to give you a raise if he's going to give you a raise, or if it's time for the raise, or in order to make more money, what do you think what are those steps that need to be taken for you to make more money?
I think it starts before you even take the job. So for example, at RBB, all of our pay salary levels are transparent. For every title, you can see the range of salary. So you know what your career path looks like. So if you're looking at a job at RBB, you can say, okay, this is where I think I'm going to go. This is how the process works. They do annual performance reviews. We do monthly check-ins with my manager. You know, they will tell me in the interview process that this is how feedback is collected in terms of performance. If you show up at the job and they won't tell you what the salary ranges are, and you don't know what the career path is, to me, that's a red flag that says, I'm going to have to be more aggressive. And I think that, so it starts even before you have the job. Then once you have the job, you have to know your corporate culture. And you have to be able to say, how do I make the case? You know, I think, you know, Kim said, you know, the case isn't just I want more money or I want a better car. The case has to be, and I've had so many people come in and say, well, you know, I don't want to live at home anymore. And I'm like, well, and that's my problem. Why? You know, but if you come to me and say, I've added value for this, and I've brought that, and I've done this. That's why, like I said, I have 27-year-old VPs. I have 35-year-old partners who are now equity partners in our business because they've shown that they add value. And by the way, searching on the internet for like salaries is a terrible waste of time because you can never compare apples to apples. I mean, and like Kim said, talking to friends, people don't always tell you the truth about what their salaries are. You should really focus on what you contribute and what the business contributes, but you should also recognize some businesses are just not going to be good businesses and they are going to take advantage. My industry is terrible for sweatshop mentality. And you can usually tell just by the way the interviews go.
Yeah, I think TV news is pretty terrible too. You know, I think, I mean, I'll be honest with you, gone are the days of the ginormous TV salaries that we heard about. And, you know, I don't mean to be a buzzkill here, but I mean, I just think those days are gone in local news. That being said, I think that you can manage your expectations and, you know, just like Christine said, you need to build your case and you need to be able to walk away and find something else if you don't like what you're getting paid. I would also argue that money shouldn't be the only reason that you stay in a job, or it shouldn't be the only reason to look for a new job either. You know, the older I get, the more I realize that there's a lot of other things that come with work, and you know, this was talked about a little bit earlier on the call, but you know, vacation time is really important. But I know that money drives so much of what we do. You know, building your case is the best thing. Think about what you would want somebody to say to you if you wanted, if they, you know, if somebody wanted you to give them more money, and how you would react. But I think in many cases, you have to be ready to say, okay, this isn't work, and I'm ready to go walk away and go somewhere else, which can be very scary too.
I believe earlier it was Christine, I think it was Christine that mentioned this. So we were talking about when things go wrong, placing the blame on somebody else and not taking ownership of it. My question would be, how, as a leader, would you try to instill that in someone? So, for example, I work in TV news, so do you, Kim? So that's what our background is. So those are our examples. So if, for example, there's a story and the script was wrong, and I reach out and, hey guys, what was wrong with the script? Oh, but it wasn't me, it was so and so, she made the error. And then you go ask this person, and no, but it was the writer. And so there's this chain of like, no, it was this person, that. How do we just say, hey guys, or wherever you work in a store, oh, why was this tag ripped off? Oh, it was a sales associate. It was, I worked in retail once when I was 17 years old. So there's this chain of like, no, everybody else did it. So how do we change the conversation as a leader? How do you tell that one person, you know what, it's okay to own up to a mistake. We are human. You're not a robot. You're going to make mistakes. Just, it was a mistake. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'll do better next time. A lot of people have a hard time accepting that or even saying it in leadership roles. So how do you fix that chain of command, and how do you fix that language?
Well, I think if you admit you make a mistake as a leader, that is a indication that it's okay for others to admit they make the mistakes. You know, you use your script example. I would say, you know, you're a leader in your newsroom, Nicole. It's okay for you to pull that person aside privately, not publicly, but privately, and say, listen, hey, I get it, but you know, this was a mistake. I just want to make sure you know for next time. But you know, so it's two things. I think it's okay for leaders in the newsroom to do that privately, but I also think it's okay I think it's imperative that leaders in the newsroom, in the television station, in different departments, admit to their mistakes. You know, when I came in here a few months ago, I told everybody right away, I don't have all the answers. I am going to make some mistakes. I've already made them. And if people see that it's you as the person that's the head of the station, you as the anchor of the newscast, you know, you that's running the PR company admit to making a mistake, I think it makes people not feel okay about making mistakes, but makes them feel okay about, okay, I can admit I made a mistake and I'm not going to get fired.
Christine?
Owning it is a big thing in what we do.
Mm-hmm. I think, again, I'll go back to, it's not what you say, it's what you do. So we hired, I won't even say the position because I don't, you know, a new person who was running one of our departments. And when the creative came across and I said, I didn't think that this matched what the brief was, he sighed and he said, you know, at my previous job, I would have gotten a phone call that said, how could you put this kind of garbage in front of me? And I would have been yelled at repeatedly, and I would have been told, you're going to work through the night and the weekend to fix this. And then the phone would have hung up. And he said, I can't believe the difference. And you're telling me where I've missed, you know, some of the mark, and we're going to work together on this. It's not what you say, it's what you do. I bet you that. And he used to tell me that person used to say, it's okay to make mistakes, but it wasn't, because you get yelled at. So it's like people who put that in their values, that we're collaborative and we're trustworthy, and then they're not. You know, people can have that on a book on a shelf. It's what you do that matters. And yes, showing vulnerability, but more important is remembering you were once in that position. How would you want to be spoken to? If you, like you said, publicly calling out people to me is the worst. You know, and even in an email string, you know, what happened, copy 12 people, right? You know, And a lot of the time, what I say with mistakes is let it go. The only time a mistake really needs to be brought up is if you feel that that mistake occurred because of a process error. So in other words, do we need to do a debrief? Let's say we missed a deadline on something and we felt like we need to let's have a debrief so we can figure out what was the problem here. And then we found out that the problem was that accounting didn't have the right code set up, so it wasn't giving the alerts. And then we fixed that process. And then everyone feels like debriefs and going over mistakes has valuable outcomes. It's not just about admitting the guilt. It's about, saying I'm sorry, but also making sure that from a productivity standpoint, we're all on the same page and that it won't happen again, because it's not just, sometimes it is just human error, but sometimes it's not.
Mhm. I agree. Okay, we have 2 questions. I'm going to do these 2 questions from the audience because I think they're going to take up the rest of our time. This first one, this will probably take some time. So this one is from Cora. She says, do you think there's a problem working for a network that is associated or leans politically with one certain group?
Can I plead the fifth? Wow, that's a tough one. I think
Kim, do you want to take a minute? And I want to give an
Yeah.
answer. It's a little different. Then Kim can think about what she wants to say. But I would say I have the same issue in terms of same thing in PR and marketing. Sometimes people don't want to work for certain clients, and they will say, I'm a vegetarian, I'll come work for you, but I won't work for Purdue. And I would say, again, there are agencies that are on the left and agencies that are on the right. There are agencies that do government work only for Republicans or only for Democrats. You can choose. If you do your homework, you need to look at the environment and what the job might require. And if you see that that might require you to be against some of your personal beliefs, you should think twice about where you choose to work. But don't be surprised or come into an agency, especially, and say, well, I took this job, but I won't work on these accounts. If you don't have that discussion up front, everyone's going to be disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was kind of going down the same lines. I was just trying to figure out how to say it the right way to be. I think you can work at a network that leans one way or the other. But again, as a journalist, you have to believe in your story, whether you work at WPLG in Miami, WFOR in Miami, or any of the local stations you're in. You have to believe in the story that you're presenting. You have to believe in the product that you're putting out there to the public. And if you don't fundamentally believe in what you're doing, I don't know how you can, in good conscience, do that job and do it the right way and build your career. So do I think it's bad to work at a network that leans one way or the other? I don't think it's bad, but I think that you have to be 100% engaged in your story, engaged in your product. That's where the trickiness comes. So, just like in PR, if you're asked to represent something that you don't believe in, that's what I would say. I think that, what we do as journalists has changed dramatically because of some of the cable outlets. But I know plenty of people who work in those environments. And I ask them sometimes, do you believe in what you're doing? And if they do, hey, I don't think there's an issue. But I don't think it's something where if you have any hesitation, that's where I think it's an issue.
Okay, so the final question says, what are the top 3 qualities of a strong female leader? Like to know what all of you think, including Nicole. I'll go first so you guys can think of yours. And then I'm running out of here like lightning because I have to do the 4 o'clock news. So I don't have a lot of time, so I'll be fast. I think there are a lot of qualities that a strong female leader should have. In my line of work, my biggest would be communication. You need to be a good communicator more than anything in the world, because that chain of communication, if it is not clear, you will not get the right message out. It'll be all, phone tag when you tell one person something and then it changes 500 times. You need to be clear with your message and with what you want out of anything, your life, your job, whatever it is that you want, you need to be clear. And I only learned that in this business. And being told a lot of no's, and also being, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, and crying a lot, and being that type of person. But I grew from it, and I learned that I needed to communicate. You need to be confident, not cocky, confident. You need to be sure of yourself with what you're doing in your job, and you need to show that to the people that work next to you, beneath you, above you. And I think you also need to be motivated. If you are not motivated, you will not get anywhere in life. When my previous job, I worked in production. I loved the people I worked with, but I was not motivated. And I worked in a little dark corner, typing things away on a computer. And I stayed there for 6 years, which in my opinion was too long. So you need to have a fire under you to be able to progress in anything you do in life.
You can go next if you want.
Go ahead.
I think that you need to be dedicated not only to the job, but to the people around you. I think that's critically important as a leader, to know your people, know who you work with, and know what makes them tick in one way or the other. I think you need to be empathetic, and that's something that is so critical as a leader now. I'm not saying soft, but I think you need to be empathetic, because I think it's much different now past the pandemic and the social justice changes that we've seen. I think that's critically important to, again, motivate folks in what you do. And then I always say also be confident, but be willing to ask questions. Confident, confident but cocky, maybe that's what I should do. But I always say confident, but be willing to ask questions. I have argued with so many people that say, oh, I'm never going to ask a question that shows that I don't know what I'm doing. That's a sign of a bad leader. I completely disagree. I think if you're confident, but you ask questions, it shows that you're willing to still learn more, and you don't necessarily have all the answers. I think it's really critically important. And then I just want to say one more thing. I think those are good qualities of all leaders, not just women. And this is, don't take this the wrong way, Nicole. I know this is for women in communication, but I hate when people say, what are good qualities of women leaders? Because I think these are good qualities of all leaders. And I think that we can, if more men and women and dogs and cats led this way, it would be much better workplace for all of us.
Amen. I'm going to frame mine as, I want you to, good leaders have a really big front windshield and a really tiny little rear view mirror. You want to make sure you're looking around you. You want to never limit your opportunity. Straight ahead isn't always the fastest means to an end, so you have to look for all of the options. You want to make sure that, like you said, if you have a dream, you chase it. But remember that life is a little bit like a roll of toilet paper. It goes faster when you get to the end. So, don't wait for things that are important. Something Robin mentioned earlier, there is no such thing as work-life balance, but there is what I call work-life blend. You can't fit all your work in 9 to 5 and all your life into nights and weekends. So you have to be willing to make those trade-offs and manage it, almost like the way you manage your other deliverables. And lastly, no shade, make others happy. I promise you, doing something good for someone else makes you feel really great too. And when you get known as someone who does good for others, more people will want you on their teams. More people will want to promote you. More people will want to work with you. And that just gives you more opportunity.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you all so, so much. Kim, Christine, Robin, everybody who spoke on behalf of everyone here today, myself too. I've learned so much. I appreciate it. Thank you to all the students with the questions. I mean, this was wonderful. So I'm going to conclude now, and I'm going to run out the door, and then you guys all turn your TVs on or log online, watch local10.com. Kim, you didn't hear that. Okay, bye everyone.